Welcome to the Movie Business Podcast, picking up where Movie Business Book left off. I'm Jason Squire, hosting a wide range of industry talent and executives to answer fundamental questions about the business today. Here we go. So today we are covering the secrets of Alpha Studios with KAITLYN Yang, the founder and Visual Effects Supervisor at Alpha Studios. She has over 70 visual effects credits, including The Walking Dead, Grey's Anatomy, and American Born Chinese. KAITLYN is also a co-founder of 1 in 4, a coalition of increasing employment and authentic representation of disabled people on screens. She was honored as one of Forbes 30 Under 30 in entertainment, one of Variety's 10 Artisans to Watch, and received the 2023 USC Alumni Association's Young Alumni Merit Award. Welcome, KAITLYN.
Hi, Jason. Thank you for having me. This is a pleasure.
Well, I'm glad you're here at the Movie Business Podcast. Let's start in by asking, what are the secrets of Alpha Studios?
Ooh, that's a good question. For me, it's really about how to keep the passion and fascination for the visual effects industry as a whole and have enough energy left over to run a visual effects company. This part, right, I don't know how much of it was really up to me and how much of it was inspired by, the movie industry as a whole, but I was bitten by the visual effects bug at a really young age. I think one of the pivotal sequences, I remember watching the pod racing sequence from the first Star Wars, Phantom Menace. And it was the coolest thing I've ever seen as a kid at that point in my life. And I just remember I wanted to learn exactly how they made that. And the secret for me is that I kind of kept that childlike excitement for visual effects all these years. And I love seeing all the arts on the silver screen. And particularly, I fell in love with digital compositing, which I learned from watching a lot of sci-fi movies. And this is how they're able to build different worlds and augment areas that we have here on Earth to be like XYZ, different worlds and different environments. And that fascination really sustained my entryway into the industry, but really kept me learning from all the great masters and all their secrets and their trades and, how they're able to take a part of their life experience and put that into the shots that they're working with. I think, that kind of a natural progression led me to explore a lot of different art forms. I did fine art for a long time. I think my strength was probably painting more than anything else. I did try my hand at sculptures and try to kind of exercise my imagination in the 3D space. And then ultimately that led me to USC Film School where we, met, and I had the pleasure of taking your class and learning from other professors and my classmates. And really, I think it's a gift of knowing that an education is a lifelong course and not something that's kind of encapsulated within a particular degree or a curriculum. And so I think that's part of my secret.
Yeah, I feel the same way. But here is the thing that's so interesting. You then pivoted to decide to create your own company. How does that happen? How did that occur?
So this, was a little bit mixture of that useful energy, right? I had back then when I opened Alpha Studios. I particularly remember I was pacing back and forth in the employee parking lot at a fantastic company that I had, that I was working at as a senior compositor. And it was one of the companies that I dreamed of working as a kid. And I, kind of gotten some great news, but not ideal at the time of an opportunity to work abroad as a visual effects supervisor. And while I loved giving that opportunity, I also wasn't completely sure if I wanted to uproot and kind of change my life overnight in pursuit of my career. Especially, I think I was just at the on-ramp at the time of knowing that the more that I can fill my own cup, that is aside from my identity at work and my job title and everything, the happier I was as a person. And so I took a leap of faith and I made a bet on myself, of all people. And so I decided, to turn down the amazing work opportunity. And this was the reason I was, kind of pacing back and forth in the parking lot and didn't really know if I should do it. A lot of people in my corner, I think, to a good degree, they also said, this might be the riskier of the two paths, of starting something on your own. And this was in 2013. And I'm glad I did it. And if I were given any sort of a time traveler, whether that be the DeLorean or a hot tub, I think I would do it. I think I would make the exact choice because I think if I didn't, then I would always wonder what my life would be, would it become? I think I would always wondered what my life would be if I kept working at a larger company instead of starting something on my own. But in the midst of that, having come from the artistic side and having gone through film school, when I created my own company, I quickly realized that I was needing more business acumen and more knowledge on the strategy side, the finance side, how to manage a production team efficiently, how to lead with grace. And, those are the skills that I'm really glad that my path kind of took me on, and for me to kind of pick up additional skills along the way that kind of built up on my foundation of visual effects.
Wow. So it really was a continual learning experience, but also because of something that you cannot teach, the entrepreneurial spirit. And that's exactly what you have.
Well, thank you. I think my entrepreneurial spirit, was initially sparked by a wanting to work in this industry, but wanting to do a few things on my own terms. Especially, I think I have to mention the gender imbalance within visual effects. And that is, definitely an undercurrent of challenges. And I was never able to comment on this particular challenge when I was working for others. And so when I made the leap, it really gave me more fuel to be true to myself and to also learn where I can use my knowledge and my network, my influence for change, hoping I'll leave this industry better than when I found it all these years ago, about 20 years ago at this point. And I think you also need to surround yourself with like-minded people in order to kind of refuel the spirit of keep going on your own path. Obviously we have an amazing team and we had the great privilege of working with so many great clients over the years. We definitely learned a great deal of lessons from the process of collaboration. I think visual effects, the art form in particular, it needs a great deal of pre-visualization in your head first and foremost, and that can be especially challenging when you're working with such a large team of how do you communicate what you see in your mind or what you have an inkling for with other people, with vast different methods of communicating. How do you communicate the broad strokes versus the nuance, and how do you kind of do that while being on a team?
Well, this is a great segue to describing, if you will, to those not really familiar with visual effects except as consumers, the workflow of a typical shot. The elements, capturing approvals as simply as you'd like.
I think for the general public, the best form of praise is for visual effects is when our work stays invisible. And all the hard work that we put into each segment and each shot help the audience stay engaged with the emotional journey that the story took them on. But for many departments, including visual effects, everything starts with the script. And everything starts with initial broad stroke conversations with the creative team. That is often the director, the executive producers, the point people on the studio side. You have your other heads of departments, especially production design and costume, hair and makeup. So much of visual effects is augmenting on what's already in the frame itself. And again, really a practice of different methods of communicating, whether that be using storyboards, mood boards, using tools like Shot Deck, of figuring out what visual elements are needed that is not, able to be produced by any other department or is not safe to capture on set, that then the visual effects take over in post-production. But how do we film on the day that is the most conducive for computer-generated work after the fact?
So that's good. Let's turn to that typical day.
Yeah, if we're imagining on the day, I would say a lot of my day starts with about 12 hours before the actual day itself. And many times, many hours before that too, of communicating with the production designer exactly how we're going to hide the seam of our green screen or blue screen. And also with the director of photography on the best way of lighting the practical set that we have and lighting the actor, in addition to lighting the green screen, in a way that can let us have correct direction of sunlight and any other ambient lighting that needs to be mimicked at some point in post-production when we remove the green screen and blue screen itself. And a lot of it, kind of comes from blocking with the actor itself. This is where pre-visualization or look development comes in, of giving this large team an idea of what the background for this green screen is supposed to look like after the fact. And so we can all work in tandem to make sure that this is executed. And then on the day, my job really is to try to reverse engineer. If I have somewhat of what the shot is supposed to look like in my head, then how do I communicate to everyone else involved that, maybe we need to put tracking markers here and there at the particular height in the particular increment that we do? How do we then document all the lights? My dog in the background.
But I think that's an example of some kind of visual effects right there, live, right?
Sometimes I'll have to communicate with the DP of where we're placing certain lights. That is the best way for us to mimic in post, and kind of what light artifacts and streaks and so forth that we can minimize, that we can still be added in or augmented later on. A lot of what a visual effects supervisor does on the day on set is really just capturing exactly what happened, with what camera and what lens, the distance, the type of lights, the number of lights, any other elements. Can we get any elements from the special effects team that we can do practically, either in shot or on another day when we're just filming elements, so that we can have all the pieces, if you will, for this very large piece of puzzle then we're going to put together 3 or 6 months down the line.
What happens in post? You're there in post?
Yes.
So a couple of steps,
A couple of steps. For a good team, the visual effects supervisor and producer are usually on from the very beginning till the very end. In post-production, right, a lot of it too kind of comes from what eventually ends up in the edit, and what pieces that we were planning for can be discarded for things that are not part of this edit of the story. What pieces can we recycle to fix any unplanned changes? What visuals do we need to then refine to make sure that we have the maximum fidelity for a hero shot, for cutaway shots, what other elements or characters, creatures, however have you, that we need to add for a particular scene to highlight the story arc. So, then we're really working with our team of creatives that is our visual effects vendors, and we usually kind of put them per project on a lot of kind of different reasons, partly because of their track record and previous working relationship, but partly also because of any strength that they have. I think all visual effects supervisors have their go-to for creature work, right, which is very delicate and a very complex, you need a complex pipeline to kind of produce the type of work that a lot of us are after, just really massaging it day by day of figuring out if current technologies is sufficient or, if before the production, if any additional investment needs to make for new technology, for exactly what the script called for. A lot of back and forth. And it does get exciting when you start to see different versions of the words coming into fruition and you're kind of blocking it in frame and you're doing the test animation and you're putting the texture on things and then you're matching the lighting. And then, you're still working with a key creative team to make sure that, these are all kind of, within our initial conversations. And there are, sometimes where you get kind of beautiful kind of pockets of perchance of something that someone brings that you didn't think about or, it was on plan for, but it kind of just works for the film and kind of add more nuance that way. Yeah.
Then it sort of has come full circle and you do this with every single shot.
We do this for every shot, and we often do frame by frame quality check, to make sure that everything is as good as can look on a silver screen.
That's so helpful because it is a great way for the audience to more fully appreciate the visual effects that they're watching on the screen. Let me ask a different question. What advice do you have for someone wanting to enter the field?
Ooh, okay. I'm going to try to rewind time and put myself at a mindset that I had prior to starting USC Film School. I think the advice I will give to someone like myself is really to pace yourself. This is not a race with anyone but you and the height of your imagination versus your physical and mental capacity to carry that as far as you can. I would advise anyone entering any subfield within the entertainment industry to learn about the whole pipeline of filmmaking and storytelling as a whole, because what the audience is going to turn on a TV for at home is really to be taken on an emotional experience. And visual effects, when done well, is an integral part of that ride. I particularly love this field, mainly because it combines so much of my interest with computer programming and then with the digital capturing of photography and combining with acting. So many of the films that I recall that inspired me, there was something about each character that really resonated with me. And so learning, about how visual effects can be part of a tool, but know that at this day and age in the year 2025, a lot of the audience is not going to the theaters purely to see a spectacle that is made by visual effects, but rather for the visual effects to kind of be a supporting character of this emotional journey. I think I will also tell myself that investment in your own mental health is always going to pay for tenfold. That's taken me quite a while to fill my own cup of my identity that is outside of my work, that is outside from working on the box, as we like to call it, whenever we're at our computer stations. And, it's really good practice to manage your own insecurities early on, whether that be anxiety. I think we all have kind of this fear that we're not as good as we think, a lot of imposter syndrome, because, eventually you want to be as good as you can possibly be at the time for you to be part of this large team.
Wow, that's such a great summary, especially the personal aspect that is so rare for an audience to understand, and the kind of encouragement that you offer to jump into a career of visual effects. Thank you so much, KAITLYN Yang, for being a guest on the Movie Business Podcast. Thank you.
It's my pleasure, Jason.